Hey, my name's Ethan Brooks. I'm 28 years old, white guy living in Willow Creek, this tiny town in the Midwest with barely 3,000 people. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your business, but nobody really cares enough to ask how you're doing. I work at the local tax office, crunching numbers all day in a stuffy room that smells like old coffee and printer ink. It's steady pay, but it sucks the life out of you. Today was one of those days that hit harder than usual. I got the email from my boss right before lunch. Sorry, Ethan, but we're going with someone more proactive for the promotion. Proactive? What the hell does that even mean? I've been there 5 years, showing up on time, getting the job done without complaints, but apparently that's not enough. I felt like a punch to the gut, like all my quiet efforts were invisible. So, after work, I headed straight to the Dusty Lantern, the old dive bar on the edge of town. It's got creaky wooden floors, dim yellow lights, and the same jukebox that's been playing the same scratched records for decades. I go there when I need to drown out the noise in my head. I sat at my usual spot near the window, where the streetlights flicker through the glass, making the bourbon look like liquid gold. I ordered my drink, stared at the foam settling on top, and tried to convince myself that tomorrow would be better. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The bar was busier than usual that night, the summer heat making everyone restless. Laughter echoed from the pool tables, glasses clinked, and the air was thick with cigarette smoke and spilled beer. I wasn't paying much attention to anyone until I saw her, Sophia Reed. She's 43, lives in the apartment right above mine in that rundown building on Elm Street. I've seen her around for the past 3 months, mostly through the window when she's out on her balcony. Sometimes she's smoking a cigarette, staring at the horizon like she's lost in thought. Other times she's watering her potted plants, her movements slow and deliberate. We've exchanged nods or quick good mornings in the hallway, but nothing more. She's got this natural beauty. Pale skin, long brown hair usually tied back, sharp eyes that seem to see right through you. But there's always this tiredness in her expression, like she's carrying something heavy. Tonight, she's working the evening shift as a waitress here, carrying trays of drinks with that same quiet efficiency. She's wearing a white button-up shirt with the collar slightly open, sleeves rolled up to her elbows, and her hair in a messy bun. Even in the dim light, she stands out, moving through the crowd like she owns the place but doesn't want the attention. I watched her for a moment, not in a creepy way, just noticing. She's the kind of woman who makes you wonder about her story. I was midway through my second bourbon when she approached my table, tray in hand. But she wasn't bringing a drink. Her eyes darted around the room and there was something off. Her hands were shaking slightly, her face paler than usual. She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling with urgency. "Can you dance with me? Just one slow song?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She glanced over her shoulder, her breath quickening. "Please, my ex-husband's watching." My heart started pounding. I followed her gaze to the dark corner of the bar where a man sat alone nursing a beer. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with a sharp jaw and eyes locked on us like lasers. Marcus Hale, the guy who runs the local shopping district, owns half the rental properties in town. I'd heard the rumors he was powerful, controlling, and their divorce had been messy. Everyone in Willow Creek knew bits and pieces, but nobody talked about it openly. Sophia looked back at me, her eyes pleading, desperate. "I don't need you to save me. I just don't want him thinking I'm alone, that he broke me." The words hit me like a freight train. I could see the fear in her eyes mixed with defiance. My mind raced. Should I say no? Walk away? But something in her vulnerability pulled at me. I'd been feeling invisible all day, and here she was, seeing me, asking for help. Without thinking, I nodded, set my glass down with a clink that echoed in my ears, and stood up. "Okay." I offered my hand. Her fingers were cold as they slipped into mine, but she gripped tight like I was a lifeline. We walked to the small, worn wooden dance floor in the center of the bar. The jukebox was playing a soft jazz tune, something slow and melancholic, the speakers crackling faintly. The room seemed to hush, or maybe it was just in my head. I could feel eyes on us, not just Marcus's, but a few regulars glancing over, whispering. My pulse thundered in my temples. I'd never been much of a dancer, but I placed my hand on her waist, gentle, respectful. She rested hers on my shoulder and we started moving, swaying to the rhythm. Her body was tense at first, close, but not too close, her breath shallow. "Thank you," she whispered, still not looking at me. I didn't know who else to ask. I swallowed hard, my voice low. "I'm not dancing to save anyone. I'm dancing because I see you need to be seen." That was it, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. For months, I'd watched her from afar, this strong woman who seemed so alone. And now, here we were, in this charged moment, the air electric with unspoken words. She finally lifted her eyes to mine and time stopped. Her gaze was raw, vulnerable, like she'd been holding back tears for years. The music swelled, the trumpet solo piercing the tension. Marcus's stare burned into my back. I could feel it without turning, but I didn't care. In that instant, something shifted. Her hand warmed in mine, her body relaxed slightly against me. No more words, just the sway, the connection. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something deeper, a silent promise. As the song faded, she pulled back, her eyes glistening. "You don't know what this means." But I did. In that dance, under the watchful eyes of the bar, I'd stepped out of my invisible life. And she'd let me in, just a little. The night had changed everything. The morning after that dance felt like a haze, like I'd woken up in a different version of Willow Creek. My head was pounding from the bourbon, or maybe from the adrenaline that hadn't fully worn off. I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning lazily, replaying every second of it. Sophia's cold hand in mine, her eyes finally meeting mine, the weight of Marcus's stare on my back. I'd never done anything like that before, stepping into someone else's mess without a second thought. But it felt right, like for once, I wasn't just going through the motions. The town was still asleep when I got up, the streets quiet under the early sun. I showered, threw on a clean shirt and jeans, and headed to the corner diner for 2 coffees. Black for me and one with cream and sugar, guessing that's how she might take it. Why? I don't know. Maybe I owed her an explanation, or maybe I just wanted to check if she was okay. Her apartment was right above mine, but I'd never knocked on her door before. Climbing the stairs felt strange, my heart picking up speed with each step. What if she regretted it? What if Marcus had followed her home? I pushed the thoughts aside and rapped lightly on 2B. The door opened after a moment, and there she was, Sophia, looking fresher than last night but still tired around the eyes. Her hair was pulled up high, and she was wearing a thin sweater over yoga pants, like she'd just gotten out of bed. Surprise flickered across her face, but it softened into something almost relieved. "Ethan," she said, her voice quiet, like she wasn't expecting company. "Hey," I replied, holding up the cups. "I owe you an apology for stepping on your foot last night." I tried to smile, make it light, but my voice came out a little awkward. She paused, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, I was just making breakfast." Her place was small, like mine, but warmer. Plants on the windowsill, a few framed photos on the walls, the faint smell of lavender from a candle. We ended up on her tiny balcony overlooking the main street where the mail truck was rumbling by, kicking up dust. I handed her the coffee with cream and she took a sip, nodding appreciatively. "You guessed right," she said. We sat in silence for a minute, the kind that's not uncomfortable, just settling. The town below us was waking up, Mrs. Jenkins walking her dog, the bakery opening its doors. I finally broke it. "About last night. I didn't mean to intrude, but you looked like you needed backup." She stared into her cup, swirling the liquid. "Marcus showed up out of nowhere. He owns half this town, you know. Manages the strip mall, rents out properties. Everyone thinks he's some big shot, but to me, he's just the guy who made my life hell for years." Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. I listened, not interrupting. She told me how they'd met young. She was 22, fresh out of community college, thinking marriage would fix everything. He was older, charming at first, but controlling. He decided what I wore, who I talked to, even what I cooked. And when I finally left after finding out about his affairs, the town acted like I was the one who broke something sacred. She paused, her fingers tightening on the cup. "Now I'm just the waitress who cleans up after drunks. Every night I spray perfume to cover the beer smell before I go to bed." I felt a pang in my chest. That sounds exhausting. She looked at me then, really looked. "What about you? Why were you there alone, looking like the world kicked you?" I shrugged, but the words came out easier than I expected. I got passed over for a promotion today. Been at the tax office for years doing the work, but they want someone proactive. Whatever that means. I moved here from Boston a few years back. Tried the big city life, the corporate grind, but I burned out. Came to Willow Creek for something quieter, less pressure, but sometimes it feels like I'm just fading. She nodded slowly. You remind me of myself at 25. Back when I thought if I just tried hard enough, everything would fall into place. But life doesn't work that way. We laughed a little, the tension easing. The coffee grew cold as we talked more, about her dreams of opening a small shop someday, maybe selling handmade crafts, about my half-baked idea of starting a side hustle in accounting for local farms. She shared how the divorce had left her broke, fighting for every penny while Marcus walked away unscathed. People whisper, you know. Poor Sophia couldn't keep him happy. I leaned forward. They're wrong. You didn't fail, you survived. Her eyes met mine again, softer this time. Thanks for saying that. And for last night. It meant more than you know. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the street. We finished our coffees, the conversation flowing like we'd known each other longer than a few months. For the first time in a while, I didn't feel invisible. And from the way she smiled, maybe she didn't feel so alone either. As I stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly. Stop by any time. Balcony's always open? I nodded, stepping out into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me. That morning, coffee had cracked something open, not just between us, but inside me. Willow Creek suddenly felt a little less suffocating. The days after that coffee on the balcony turned into a strange kind of limbo. I kept going to work, filing reports, answering calls about property assessments, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the way Sophia's eyes had softened when she talked about her past, the small laugh she let slip when I admitted my own failures. I started looking for her in the hallway, hoping for a quick hello, maybe a shared glance that said we were still on the same page. But she was gone. Not literally, she was still upstairs, but she pulled back. No more quick waves from the balcony. No more good mornings in the stairwell. When I passed her in the lobby, she'd nod politely, eyes down, like we were strangers again. It stung more than I expected. Willow Creek is small, and small towns have a way of turning whispers into facts overnight. It started at the Sunday morning coffee shop on Main Street, the one with the chipped mugs and the same 5 regulars every weekend. I walked in for my usual black coffee, and the air changed. Mrs. Harlan, the librarian who'd known me since I was a kid, leaned over to her friend and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, Sophia Reed's got herself a young man now? That boy from the tax office, of all people. The other woman chuckled, low and mean. Poor thing. Must be desperate after Marcus. I pretended not to hear, but my face burned. By Monday, it had spread. At the office, one of the older guys slapped me on the back during lunch break. Heard you got yourself a date with the waitress upstairs. Careful, kid. She's got baggage. He said it like a joke, but his eyes were sharp, judging. Another coworker, a woman in her 50s, gave me a pitying look across the break room. You know she's Marcus Hale's ex, right? Don't get tangled up in that. I forced a smile, mumbled something about minding my own business, but the words stuck. Everywhere I went, the grocery store, the gas station, people looked at me differently, some with amusement, some with disapproval. A few even asked outright, You and Sophia? Really? I brushed it off, but inside, it ate at me. Not because I was ashamed of her, God, no, but because I hated how quickly they reduced her to gossip, how they painted her as broken or desperate. And me? I was just the young guy who couldn't do better. Sophia must have felt it too. She stopped coming out on her balcony in the evenings. When I saw her at the farmer's market on Saturday, she was picking through tomatoes, and when our eyes met, she turned away, walking quickly to the next stall. I stood there, basket in hand, feeling like I'd been slapped. The silence between us grew heavier each day. I told myself to let it go. Maybe the dance had been a one-time thing, a moment of weakness for her, a stupid impulse for me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was pulling away because of the town, because of what they were saying. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Finally, one evening after work, I couldn't take it anymore. The sky was turning that bruised purple color, the kind that makes everything feel heavier. I climbed the stairs to 2B, heart hammering, and knocked. The door opened slowly. Sophia stood there in a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, hair loose, looking like she hadn't slept well. Her eyes were wary. "Ethan, can we talk?" I asked, voice low. She hesitated, then stepped aside. I walked in, the door clicking shut behind me. The apartment smelled like chamomile tea and something faintly floral. We stood in the living room, not sitting, just facing each other. "If you're embarrassed about being seen with someone like me," I said, "I get it, I do. But I need you to know, I'm not embarrassed. Not about you. Not about what people are saying." She looked at me for a long moment, then walked to a small shelf by the window. She pulled out a wooden box, simple and worn, and handed it to me. Inside was a man's tie, dark blue, old, knotted perfectly. "I used to tie this for Marcus every morning," she said quietly. "He liked it neat, controlled. Then, one day, after the divorce papers came through, I took it off the hanger and cut it into pieces with kitchen scissors. Threw the scraps in the trash." She traced the knot with her finger, but I kept one piece. "I don't know why." Her voice cracked a little. "I spent years letting him decide who I was, what I wore, who I talked to. When I left, I thought I'd finally be free, but the town, they still see me as his ex, as the woman who couldn't keep him." I set the box down carefully. "They're wrong." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I don't need someone to replace him. I just need someone who won't run when I show them the pieces." I stepped closer, not touching her yet. "I'm not running." The words hung there. Then she moved, slowly, like she was testing the ground, and wrapped her arms around me. It wasn't passionate, it was just holding. Her head against my chest, my arms around her shoulders, the tie box forgotten on the table. We stood like that for what felt like hours, the only sound our breathing, and the distant hum of traffic outside. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were clearer. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not being scared off." I smiled, small and real. "I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, and for the first time since the dance, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. The town could talk, they could whisper and judge. But in that moment, in her apartment, none of it mattered. We had something quieter, stronger, something they couldn't touch. One rainy evening a couple of weeks after that talk in her apartment, the weight of the town's gossip had started to fade a little for me. Work was the same grind, endless forms and audits. But knowing Sophia was just upstairs made the days feel less empty. We'd been careful, keeping things light. A shared coffee here, a quick text about the weather there. No dates, no labels, just this quiet understanding that we were in each other's orbit now. But I missed the ease we'd had on the balcony that first morning, before the whispers got louder. The rain had been pounding down all day, turning the streets of Willow Creek into slick mirrors under the streetlights. I couldn't shake the memory of our dance at the bar, the way it had sparked something real. So, after dinner, alone in my apartment with a microwaved meal, I grabbed my old Bluetooth speaker from the closet, the one I'd bought years ago for backyard barbecues that never happened. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, threw on a raincoat, and headed out. The dusty lantern was only a few blocks away, but the downpour made it feel longer. Water splashed up from puddles as I walked, my shoes soaking through. I didn't care. I needed to see her, to remind us both that what we had wasn't just a reaction to the town's bullshit. The bar was dead when I pushed open the door, a far cry from the night we'd danced. Only a couple of regulars hunched over their drinks at the far end, nursing whiskeys and staring at the TV mounted on the wall, where a muted baseball game flickered. The air smelled like wet wood and stale peanuts. Sophia was behind the counter, wiping it down with a rag, her movements mechanical, like she was on autopilot. She looked up when the door creaked, and her face softened into a small, surprised smile. "Ethan, what are you doing out in this mess?" I shrugged off my coat, hanging it on a hook by the door. Water dripped from my hair, but I didn't mind. "Couldn't stay cooped up. Thought I'd come say hi." She glanced around the empty room, then back at me. "Slow night. Rain keeps everyone home." I nodded, stepping closer to the bar. She poured me a soda without asking, knew I wasn't drinking tonight, and slid it across. We talked for a bit about nothing. The storm knocking out power on the east side of town, how the roof at the tax office was leaking again. But there was an undercurrent, something unspoken hanging between us. The regulars paid their tabs and shuffled out, leaving us alone. The only sound was the rain hammering the tin roof and the faint hum of the neon sign outside. Sophia flipped the closed sign on the door early, nobody else was coming in anyway, and started stacking chairs. I watched her for a moment, then reached into my pocket. "Hey," I said, pulling out the speaker. "Got something for you." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" I set it on the bar, connected my phone, and scrolled to that jazz playlist, the one with the slow trumpet solo from our dance. The music started soft, filling the empty space with its melancholy notes. Sophia stopped wiping, her rag forgotten. "You remembered." "Hard to forget," I said. I walked around the bar, holding out my hand. "No one's watching. Want to dance one more time?" She hesitated, glancing at the empty floor, then at me. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, like a drum beat urging her on. Finally, she set the rag down and took my hand. "All right." We moved to the center of the room, the wooden floor creaking under our feet. I pulled her close, my hand on her waist, hers on my shoulder. The music wrapped around us, slow and intimate. At first, it was awkward. The space too big, the lights too harsh. But then she relaxed, her body swaying with mine. The rain blurred the windows, turning the outside world into a distant haze. She rested her head against my chest, her breath warm through my shirt. "I thought I was too old to start over," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the music. "Like I'd used up all my chances." I tightened my hold on her, feeling the curve of her back under my palm. "You're not too old. Hell, I'm 28 and I feel like I'm just figuring things out." She lifted her head, looking up at me with those sharp eyes, now soft in the dim light. "You make me feel like I can try again. But Ethan? What if this is a mistake? The age thing, the town, they'll never let it go." I stopped dancing for a second, just holding her there. "I don't care about mistakes. I care about this, right now. Starting with the right person." Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but instead she leaned in, her forehead against mine. We started moving again, slower this time, the jazz fading into a saxophone wail that matched the storm outside. She opened up more, sharing secrets she'd buried deep. How Marcus had made her doubt herself, criticizing her choices until she believed she was worthless without him. He'd say, I was too emotional, too needy. I stopped asking for anything after a while. I listened, my hand stroking her back gently. He was wrong. You're strong, stronger than he ever gave you credit for. She pulled back slightly, searching my face. And you? What's your secret? I sighed, the words tumbling out. In Boston, I was engaged once. She left because I wasn't ambitious enough. Said I was settling for mediocrity. Maybe she was right. That's why I came here, to hide, I guess. Sophia shook her head. You're not hiding, you're living. And that's more than most people do. The song ended, but we didn't stop. Another one started, and we kept swaying, the empty bar, our private world. Her hand moved to the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair. The closeness built, electric, until I couldn't hold back. I tilted her chin up and kissed her, soft at first, tentative. She responded, her lips warm and urgent, like she'd been waiting for this too. The kiss deepened, her body pressing against mine, the rain a distant roar. When we broke apart, breathless, she whispered, I didn't expect this. Neither did I said, my forehead against hers. But it feels right. We danced a little longer, sharing more. Her dreams of traveling someday, my fear of never amounting to anything. The vulnerability hung in the air, raw and real. As the playlist looped, she smiled, a genuine one that lit up her face. Thank you for this. No audience, no judgment. I held her close. Anytime. The night ended with us locking up the bar together, walking home in the drizzle, our hands brushing but not quite holding. Something had shifted again, deeper this time. We were closer, our secrets shared, the walls coming down. Willow Creek's rain had washed away the doubt, at least for tonight. A few months after that rainy night dance at the bar, things started to shift in ways I hadn't expected. Sophia quit her waitressing job at the Dusty Lantern. It wasn't dramatic, no big blowout with the owner or anything. She just handed in her notice one afternoon saying she needed a change. I'd encouraged her during one of our late-night talks, reminding her of those dreams she'd shared about doing something creative. "You've got talent," I'd said. "Why not use it?" She listened, and before I knew it, she was scouting locations for a small shop. She found a tiny storefront on the edge of Main Street, an old brick building that used to be a bookstore. It needed work, peeling paint, dusty shelves, but she saw potential. I helped her fix it up on weekends, sanding floors, hanging lights, painting the walls a soft blue that reminded her of the ocean she'd never seen. We laughed through the mess, covered in sawdust and primer, sharing sandwiches on the floor when we took breaks. She turned it into a little haven for recycled pottery, vases made from old glass bottles, mugs shaped from reclaimed clay. And in the corner, she set up a coffee nook with a secondhand espresso machine and a few mismatched chairs. She called it Reed's Reclaim, simple and fitting. The grand opening was quiet, just a handwritten sign in the window and word of mouth. But people came. Curious locals at first, then regulars. Sophia glowed behind the counter, her hair tied back with a scarf, apron dusted with clay. Watching her chat with customers, her laugh genuine and free, made something in my chest ache in the best way. I kept my job at the tax office. The same desk, the same stacks of forms. But it didn't feel as suffocating anymore. Every morning, I'd stop by my mom's house on the way to work. She lived just outside town, and pick up whatever she'd baked the night before. Muffins, scones, sometimes a loaf of banana bread. Mom had no idea who they were for. She just smiled and packed them in a paper bag, happy I was eating something homemade. I'd swing by Sophia's shop before my shift started, dropping off the treats with a quick kiss on her cheek when no one was looking. "Fuel for the day," I'd say. She'd roll her eyes but smile, slipping me a free coffee in return. We weren't dating, not in the traditional sense. No public hand-holding, no dinners at the town's only Italian place where everyone would stare. We didn't move in together or talk about rings or futures. The age gap hung there, unspoken but real, and the town's eyes were always watching. But we didn't need labels. What we had was quieter, more solid. On rainy afternoons like the ones that seemed to hit Willow Creek every other week, her shop's lights would stay on a little longer. I'd finish work, walk over in the drizzle, and slip into my spot by the window. The table with the view of the street where I could watch the world blur by while she finished up. She'd bring over a fresh brew, sit with me when the last customer left, our knees brushing under the table. We'd talk about everything and nothing. A funny customer story, my latest headache at the office, her ideas for new pottery designs. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence, her hand on mine, listening to the rain patter on the roof. When people asked, and they did, in that small-town way that pretends to be casual but isn't, Sophia handled it with grace. "What's going on with you and that young guy from downstairs?" a neighbor might say at the market. She'd smile, vague and warm. "We don't have a name for it. But I know this. Since he's been around, this town doesn't feel so cold anymore." I'd hear about it later, and it'd make me grin. She was right. Willow Creek had always felt a little chilly to me, like a place where dreams went to hibernate, but with her, it warmed up. The whispers didn't stop entirely. Mrs. Harlan still gave me side-eye at the coffee shop, and one of Marcus's buddies even cornered me at the hardware store once, muttering something about knowing my place. I shrugged it off. "Mind your own," I said, and walked away. It wasn't worth the fight. What we had was ours, not theirs. We built routines around the edges, weekend hikes in the woods outside town where no one would see us, late-night drives to the next county over for ice cream, laughing about nothing. She taught me how to throw clay on a wheel, my hands messy and useless at first, hers guiding mine until something lopsided but real took shape. I showed her my old photo albums from Boston, the life I'd left behind, and she listened without judgment. "You didn't fail," she'd say. "You chose peace." And in those moments, I believed her. We weren't perfect. There were days when doubt crept in, her wondering if I deserved someone younger, me fearing I'd hold her back. But we'd talk through it, honest and raw, always ending with her head on my shoulder, my arms around her. No grand gestures, just presence. As the seasons changed, leaves turning gold and crunching underfoot, I realized this was what I'd been missing. Not a title, not a plan, but a quiet shelter. In Willow Creek, once so empty, we'd become each other's refuge. And that was enough.